And I apologize again because we had to postpone it until today. So we are not going to have as many people as we expected for the first one, but thank you for attending. The purpose is that you become aware of the different points of view, the interest, and the power of each one of the various stakeholders that are going to participate in solving public health emergencies. We expect, as a result of the meeting, that all of us will know about the effective approaches to ensuring a successful public-private partnership. And the objectives first are to understand the need of PPP. The second one is to become familiar with the stakeholder analysis for those of you who haven't done it before, and then identify the common and specific areas of collaboration among the different stakeholders. The presentations are going to be made by mentee Xiomara Chavez Pacheco, and you can see that currently she's a project officer at one of the institutions of research more prestigious in the world. It's the equivalent of NIH for France. And you can see her background. She's a veterinarian from Peru and has also a mastership in public health. You can read everything. Zira On is the culprit, is responsible for this webinar, and she has a law degree from the University of Oxford, and she's also part of the World Economic Forum. She's probably the youngest now in the group, and currently she's a commercial associate, and she represents the biotechnology and health technology industry. Then, I'm sorry. We have Antonio Gervase, a friend since the 1980s. He is a mentor, and he's going to present the intergovernmental and governmental perspectives from the point of view of WHO. Currently, she's a consultant in STI and global health, and he's also the director of STI of the Geneva Foundation for Medical Education and Research. We use materials in our resources from the GFMER. And he's also a plastic artist, so he's going to participate in our salon. He's a physician with specialty in dermatology, venereology, and he was a MacArthur Fellow at Johns Hopkins University. And most importantly, for almost 20 years, he was a medical officer at the Department of HIV at the World Health Organization in Geneva. So he knows the world. The next one is Rodrigo Palacios. He's a mentor advisor, and you can see that the pharmaceutical industry couldn't be better represented. Rodrigo is the global policy leader for regulatory technology at Roche, the big pharmaceutical company, but he's also the chair of the European Union Regulatory Affairs and the subgroup at the European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industry Associations, a member of the Regulatory Information and Technology Working Group at Pharma. So it's well represented, and as a secret, he's my nephew. Fernando Zacarias, you all know me. I'm the founder and program coordinator of Multipod Mentoring, and I'm a physician. This is the agenda. We are going to have panel presentations, and after that, we are going to have you break out in groups, and Zira is going to explain to you what we are going to do in those groups. Then we'll return, have a discussion, and reach our conclusions. And I think that's all I have for now. So I'm going to stop sharing and give the floor to Xiomara.
Thank you, Fernando. Shirley, how do you want to proceed? Should I just try and...
Yes, you should have capabilities to share your screen now.
Right, okay, perfect, thank you.
Hi, Shadme, how are you?
Okay. Normally you should see my screen now.
Okay.
Is it okay? Can you all,
Mhm.
can you guys see it? Okay, great. So thank you once again, Fernando, for the invitation. And I'm very happy to be here and to introduce you the current work that I'm doing together with an amazing team in France. My name is Xiomara Chavez. As Fernando said, I am a veterinarian. I hold a master's in public health, graduated in 2017. And I've recently joined the INSERM team, and more precisely, the Reacting Consortium. So I'm going to very briefly explain to you what it's all about. Reacting is a collaborative network of major French research institutions coordinated by INSERM, which is the French National Institute of Health and Medical Research. It does not target any particular disease and can intervene in all infectious emergencies, especially zoonotic ones, which is the current case with SARS-CoV-2, right? So I've tried to illustrate here the Reacting's organization for tackling the current pandemic. I am going to zoom here because this is what I'm more interested about. Well, there are a lot of working groups, and I apologize because this image is not up to date. In the last couple of years, we have integrated more working groups, but now today I want to discuss this this working group, which is treatment prioritization, that I support together with another colleague, which is this smiley face here, that I will come back to that. I will come back to that later on. So how does the group work? So basically, the main objective of this group is to prioritize molecules for further performing clinical trials and deepen research in SARS-CoV-2 mainly. And of course, this year is the fashion. We have weekly meetings with research directors, medical doctors, public health specialists. All of them belong to this scientific committee. And last but not least, and it's very important to discuss this molecule classification, which well, they came up with this four classifications, which is high priority molecule, an important molecule, an interesting molecule, and others. So there were different factors that were considered for this classification. Basically, it's positive data from pilot or comparative clinical studies, positive data from at least 2 different methodologies, which can be clinical trials, animal models, or in vitro. And last but not least, and I think this is the most important one, that is to have few ongoing trials of the treatment being evaluated, because they are trying to develop research on these molecules that are not quite known to be used as possible treatment for COVID-19. Because who wants to keep researching on, you know, the molecules that have been researched all this year, right? AKA remdesivir or whatever. So as soon as you tick on these 3 conditions, you have your high priority molecule, which in our case, up to November 2020, is a treatment that is used for a genetic disorder. Very sorry, Fernando, but I cannot say it, but I can just give you this hint that is a treatment for a genetic disorder. Right now, this committee has dealt with over 60 molecules, and it's counting. Right now, we only have 1 high priority molecule, but we don't know if this month is going to change. We're going to have 1 more, or next year, what's going to happen. It's very hectic right now. So I want to finalize this, this presentation by going back to this smiley that you saw on my graph. And just to say that we are two people in charge of the scientific coordination of this working group, which is treatment prioritization. And we are both veterinarians. My colleague is Colombian, I am Peruvian. So perhaps some of you may wonder, what are veterinarians doing here, right? Well, I just wanted to leave you with this concept, which it's worldwide known right now. I think that we need to start tackling infectious diseases from this multi-sectoral perspective, as many of them have devastating impact on communities, on health systems, on economies, which result in years of social and economic recovery. So I don't want to speak as a veterinarian right now, but rather as a life science professional. Just to say that we all have the potential to significantly improve the governance of infectious diseases in general, and especially through this One Health approach, which will at the same time strengthen the global response to this SARS-CoV-2 pandemic and others to come. It's not that I wish that for, but I mean, hopefully not.
Thank you, Xiomara.
Thank you very much. And if you want to contact me, you have my LinkedIn and my email. Thank you, Fernando.
Okay, we are going to have now the presentation by Zira. We heard now the beginning of this process, the research, the basic research. And now, Zira, please go ahead with your presentation.
Hi, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So my name is Zara, and as DZ mentioned, I am a commercial associate at a biotech spin-out from Oxford. And aside from that, I'm also a trustee at a multiple sclerosis charity. So it's great to be here today to kind of talk about PPPs and also to explore the biotech perspective. So, okay, firstly, in terms of PPPs, so this kind of webinar was, the idea for this was based on an article that Dr. Jabasi and I collaborated on. And it has to do with actually exploring the different yet complementary competitive advantages that both the public and the private sectors have. And basically, so it's worth thinking about what these are and how we can foster kind of more PPPs, as we have seen at an unprecedented scale during COVID. And we can think about this from different aspects. So firstly, from a technology aspect, the private sector is very strong in that. And this is because over many years, say like pharma, biotech, and academia, there has been a lot of proprietary know-how that has been built up, say in the area of vaccine development. And so this is all also protected by intellectual property laws. And when we think about during this pandemic, what has been a big boon is that actually continued innovation has been incentivized, and this is via the protection of inventors' rights as well. And then when we think about in terms of quality control, for this one, it's really revolving around the safety and therapeutic efficacy of vaccine or therapeutic development. And maybe it's just worth noting, saying at this point, that when we discuss PPPs in the COVID-19 context here, we are specifically looking at therapeutic development. So here, the public and private sectors both have roles to play. For the public sector, this is where the independent regulatory authorities become very important. They scrutinize the study protocols of the pharmaceutical companies. And on the private sector's end, in terms of quality control, working in a biotech myself, I am, a lot of work actually goes into that. So from purification to testing to scale up. And when we think about how PPPs can work together to achieve quality control during a pandemic, one important aspect might be to look at the level of scientific evidence that's actually available and to maybe benchmark the regulatory standards against that. So what do we mean by that? One example is remdesivir. In May, it was given emergency authorization use. However, on the 20th of November, the WHO actually advised against using it because new tests had shown that there was no meaningful effect of remdesivir on mortality, ventilation, or hospitalization time. So that's an example as to how in a pandemic, both regulatory authorities and also the private sector can work together to examine what level of scientific evidence is available, and then maybe also tailor or think about how to apply regulatory standards to the available knowledge. Okay, and then next up, we also have the issues of access, transport infrastructure, and public education. So for access, both public and private sectors have their own different competitive advantages. From a public sector, this has to do with, say, procurement. For example, the COVAX initiative, where more than 180 countries have come together to ensure that there is equitable access. And then on the private sector, one aspect could be also pricing. So thinking about what kinds of pricing I think can be justified in a time of a pandemic, but at the same time also factor in the cost of innovation. And then moving on to transport and infrastructure, this is where for the public sector, the logistics is very important. For example, for some of the mRNA vaccines that we have seen, a cold chain logistics supply chain is necessary. So that's storage and transport at -70 degrees Celsius. And on the other hand, the private sector may also leverage their distribution network. For example, pharmaceutical companies in the day-to-day business, they have a very strong distribution network with local partners. So this is something that both the public and private sectors can collaborate on. Last but not least, in terms of the public education, this is where maybe the public sector is actually more well poised than, say, the private sector, in our opinion. And this is because governments essentially are the key project managers of the national response. So they can set the tone. And this is where being very candid about what we know about the pandemic, how the country is coping, as well as, say, for example, recently France, they were trying to alleviate some concerns that arose out of from the public in terms of the safety and the therapeutic efficacy of the vaccines. And it's very natural, I think, during a pandemic that many people will have questions about the new therapies being developed because it's an unknown after all. But so it's really for the governments to kind of set the tone to say, okay, we are doing the requisite tests by the regulatory authorities and to keep everyone abreast as to what we know about the pandemic and what we don't. And then maybe shifting away from the PPP focus, coming from a biotech, here are some drivers and considerations that are important to us. And maybe just a little caveat that this is all in a personal capacity and not reflective of what any affiliated organizations might think. But here are some things which I think are important. So firstly, there's the current versus future innovation. And this might be in the form of the current innovation being product focused, for example, just for a COVID-19 vaccine, but the future innovation, so protecting the requisite IP that has been developed here in terms of laying the foundation for future vaccines to be developed. So this is where maybe intellectual property considerations can be very important. The second thing, and one of the benefits that we like to tout of being a biotech, is that we are very small and very nimble. So the pace of innovation tends to be quite fast. And last but not least, in terms of go it alone versus partnership, this is a very important consideration because whilst we're very small and nimble, in terms of, say, large-scale distribution and public sector engagement, these are areas that may not really be, say, a biotech's competitive advantages. And so that's where we would really look to, say, partner with, say, pharma partners and also public stakeholders. Yep, so that's from the PPP and biotech perspective.
Thank you very much, Zira. A wonderful presentation and gives us the perspective that we needed from the private sector. Next presenter is Dr. Antonio Gervasi, who is going to make the presentation from the intergovernmental/governmental perspective. You need to unmute. Antonio, you need to unmute. Yeah.
Okay.
No, again, do it again.
it is activated.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Do you have my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being with us in this nice webinar. I'm going to talk about 3 points. The first one is how to enhance collaboration, because if we don't engage in a dialogue, it's very difficult to progress in anything. To have a dialogue, we need willingness from both sides. I remember very well Dr. Paulo Chaves presenting a drawing of 2 heads. One head fully functioned, and the other, it was damaged. If you have a problem in one of the partners, then you don't have a dialogue. You must first assume that we have partners in full control of their emotions and intellectuality. If we don't have this, Paulo Chaves used to say, forget it. Then we need to evaluate that. Otherwise, we are going to waste our time. Considering that this must be a given, we need first willingness to work together of both sectors. Somehow, this I already said in the beginning. At the same time, which is difficult today because we only frequently look to ourselves, we have different backgrounds and cultures and training, but we need to understand how the others function. And it is common. Sometimes you have an engineer talking with a lawyer and they don't understand each other. We need to do an effort to understand what are the issues of the public sector and what are the issues of the multi-sectoral sector. And this is a common, we have accusations that UN system is useless and things like that, that needs to be faster. How can we need to be faster, but how can we be fast if we need agreement of 194 countries? There's a process. At the same time, WHO needs to be faster. How can you be fast if you have to sum up all the evidence? And if you commit a mistake, it's not a mistake, a recommendation for a partner, it's not a recommendation for just one person, it's a recommendation that will scale up for the whole world. And I remember very well some recommendations. Fernando and myself, we were involved. I would say Fernando was involved in the end of the 70s. We established some strategies that now we don't agree anymore. And there are people trying to convince us that we need to stay in that strategy we proposed 30 years ago. Then we need to be careful and we need to understand the pace of each one. We have to clear management of conflict of interest. This is clear. We have to identify the ideological and political issues. We have to put ourselves in the other's head, in the other's heart, in the other network. Why don't you do that? Because sometimes they can't do that. Because sometimes the president is blocking, like United States. Testing for COVID. I just had a colleague moving from Geneva to Phoenix, CDC now. She was complaining 1 month ago, 2 months ago, that she was not able to keep COVID testing because there was blocking from the federal government. Then we need to understand what the others can do in order to fit a dialogue in order to make some progress. At the same time, we need to avoid competition in the sense of having the stage or having everything, wanting to be the very nice one, the first of the class. We need to set up what are, and this is easy to do if we have willingness to do, is a question of establishing the different roles. We need to control the prejudice. UN is useless. Private industry only only, the vision is only to get profit. We need to explain what's the information, what are the policies, what are the constituencies, what are the stakeholders asking of the private sector, what is the World Health Assembly, the UN General Assembly, the parliaments asking from governments. And of course, we need mechanisms to control corruption. If we don't have these, we can have corruption from both sides. Who started? We'll never know. At the same time, what are the opportunities? We need to be opportunistic. I had a boss that always said, we need to be strategic. We need to have clear objectives in an ethic basis, in a sound knowledge based, but at the same time, sometimes in the planning area or in the initiating something, we need to be opportunistic. In global initiatives, for instance, by 3x5 was to put 3 million under antiretroviral therapy by 2005. Somebody invented that, and then everybody jumped. Before that, there was an idea to tackle the global malaria pandemic, and there was a new idea that to have a network. And then we had the polio eradication. The polio eradication campaign some years ago, it was able to attract not only private sector, but institutions like Rotary Club, etc., etc. And we need to be attentive of the ideas of the others, the organization of the others, and then try to jump on that, contributing, not profiting only. We have new global issues. COVID is obvious. It's an opportunity to increase. At the same time, we change all the time. There was a moment in Central America that the average time a Minister of Health was in charge was 1.3 years. Sometimes we have a problem with, and I had many issues with many people. I was not able to act as an international civil servant many times, many times. I went to Myanmar once, and the guy said, I'm not going to do what you are proposing because the government does not want. Other time in El Salvador, the guy said, you can't have a mass, puedes rezar una misa, but I'm not going to change my surveillance on congenital syphilis. And that's it. And then in 1 year, the government changed, and I had a very nice Minister of Health, and we were able to negotiate. Then don't be anxious. Sometimes does not function today. Maybe we'll change with elections or coup d'etats, whatever. Fortunately, it's more elections. At the same time, global crisis, economical crisis, conflict, natural disaster, epidemics, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity. Sometimes we want to work together with the private sector, with the private pharmaceutical industry, and we have a natural disaster, or we have like Carter's Foundation. They were able, because of elimination of river blindness, to convince the pharmaceutical industry for providing a drug for dogs, expensive to provide these drugs for free to some rivers in the world, in Congo, in Ecuador, and we were able to do to an epidemic, to an endemic, to be able to do a public-private partnership. We need to be attentive to that. Nobody's a saint, but we have opportunities and we have common goals. We are able to move. Last but not least, how to move forward. We need to be absolutely, when you sit in a meeting. I sat in a meeting with Johnson & Johnson. I'm not going to say when it was, but it was a time in which there was no HIV, and Johnson & Johnson would like to sell more condoms in southern Brazil. And they sent a guy to negotiate with me to try to provide resources for education in sexually transmitted infections. I had an interest to promote that. Johnson & Johnson had an interest in sell condoms, and we went for dinner. And in this dinner, we talked about everything. The guy was so clever that he saw the phantom of my grandmother on my shoulder. And I said, okay, the guy is exaggerating a little bit. And I went directly to the point. Okay, you want to sell condoms. I want money to do education. Can we agree on that? And he said, yes, we can agree. And then we move forward. Then sometimes there are so much salam alaikum that we don't progress. It's very important to select areas of mutual interest and go for specific projects, to have clear goals. I wanted to do education. He wanted to sell condoms. We checked the ethical and legal issues, and I was able to get the resources. Sometimes it's very difficult to put people together, private sector, public sector, and facilitator, sometimes a donor which is linked to the private sector, but is linked to the government, can put people together. Sometimes we develop plans and plans and plans with objectives, visions, etc., but everything is solved in a personal, high-level contact. Give me 15 minutes with the Pope, and then maybe we'll try to convince him. But we need quality time and very high level. It's about Merkel meeting Putin and going directly to the point. Sometimes work without a plan. We do the plan after, but we need a plan, of course. But personal, let's not undervaluate the value of personal high-level contact. Summits are important. At the same time, in order to carry on, we need young and experienced secretariat. We need people with new ideas. Sometimes we are very strong about our ideas, but the ideas are getting older and older and older. And then they need to be recycled, adapted. Some ideas are more or less eternal. Rome Empire, we are still having roads of the size that were developed during Roman Empire. But the roads today are not the roads of the Roman Empire. We need young and experienced people to get the message that it's possible to do, and to do in an innovative and better way than the people did in the past, including ourselves. Voila, that's it.
Okay, thank you, Antonio. That's a very, very good perspective, and thank you for sharing your experience. Now we are going to ask Rodrigo to please make the presentation from the perspective of the pharmaceutical industry. Okay, Rodrigo, please go ahead.
Thank you, Fernando. So it's really nice, your presentation, Antonio. I think I'm going to give an example of what you're exactly talking about, because definitely this pandemic has been an opportunity to really have a strong collaboration between all kinds of different stakeholders. First of all, just at a very high level, you know, when we talk about the response from governments and in terms of like how to confront this pandemic, we can see in these three examples, the WHO, the ACT Accelerator framework. They've analyzed and basically estimated that the world needs to invest about $38 billion in meeting the challenges of the pandemic across you know, research, development, manufacturing, distribution, education, etc. In the US, Operation Warp Speed, they have invested about $11 billion in the investment in the collaboration between biotech, pharma, and other stakeholders, right? So some of the examples like Pfizer BioNTech are examples of projects that have benefited from this framework. You know, in Roche, we have a collaboration with Regeneron to distribute their drugs globally, and this was also done with facilitation from Warp Speed. And in the EU, there is a strong, a very strong push to collect funds from governments and other institutions to respond globally to the coronavirus, and they've already have pledged about 16 billion euros, right? So So this is really an era in which we are all getting together, and there's of course a lot. It could go a lot better, and it could also go a lot worse. But a lot is being done in terms of like the partnership between public and private players. I will talk about a specific case, which is a very much a smaller, I would say, aspect of it, but one in which I was involved in, so I can talk about. So basically in the EU, there was the formation of the Executive Steering Group of Shortages of Medicines Caused by Major Events, and this was set up by the European Commission with Commissioner Kyriakidis as the main lead for this commission. And this was a collaboration between the European Medicines Agency, the European Commission, and the heads of Medicines Agency, which are the heads of medicines across each member state in the EU. And the idea was that, you know, they would provide a coordinated action to ensure that there is a continued supply of medicines throughout the pandemic. And, you know, this started back in February in the EU when the pandemic was really hitting us. There was basically a single point of contact established with a very senior leader in each pharma company that the government could basically go to the vice president of manufacturing at Roche, for example, to really understand any issues that we were having in terms of manufacturing or distribution. On top of that, there were basically weekly meetings with the industry associations in Europe, in which the minister and the other members of the steering group would meet with representatives from each industry association, from the innovative industry, from the biotechnology, from the personal protective equipment, from the parallel distribution and importers, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then we would have basically weekly, you know, it would have a pace, a weekly pace in which as industry, we would get together and discuss what were the top issues that we needed to bring up to the commission. And then, you know, we would discuss that with them. They would discuss with us what they were seeing in terms of like shortages of certain things or issues on their side. And this is the way that several important reactions or measures were implemented. Like a couple of examples was, you know, a strong message that the green lanes needed to be established, because the reaction in the EU at the start of the pandemic was to close borders and to basically prevent medicines and equipment to flow from one member state to another, and also obviously with countries outside. So it was important to make sure that those blockages would end, because, you know, we are in a global supply chain. So it doesn't matter if you have a lot of, if you're manufacturing masks in France, you know, you still, those masks were not intended just for France, but they were intended for the rest of Europe and the US and worldwide, right? So it was important to limit those reactive measures. And another example was also like, you know, an escalation to the European Commission to ask, you know, to deal with India and, you know, to these top level discussions, right? Then, you know, the European Commission would discuss with the Indian government about allowing, for example, I think it was paracetamol that, you know, is primarily manufactured in India and was sorely needed in everywhere else in the world. So in essence, this was just, you know, a little bit of a flavor of how these partnerships are actually enabled and engaged in this pandemic, and these examples continue to happen. The collaboration hasn't ended; it continues to evolve, I would say, and it's in many areas. So this was just a small example on the regulatory side.
Thank you, Rodrigo. That was an excellent presentation, and you already know Diana and Giovanna, and they are also in the pharmaceutical field. And I think this is going to be a very interesting topic for discussion. What we are going to do before we move to the groups, we have 20 people attending, Shirley. So perhaps we can have 4 groups of 5. But before we go,
Well, just due to time, and we want to respect everyone's time, we only have 12 minutes right now, and then maybe a minute for close up. So what Zara and I were discussing is that if we can have a general discussion
okay,
now, and yes, if Zara could start, we have just kind of summarized one question, and then we can go from there. And so Zara, you take it away.
okay. Let me just show you something, because I made my presentation, but let me just show you something that will reiterate some of the points that Antonio and others have already made. And I'm sharing my screen right now. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Just very briefly, he was talking about the power of persuasion. And for this, remember, you are the center of the compass. You are not dealing with institutions or companies. Of course you are, but actually you are dealing with people. Those you work for, those you work with, and these are the examples, big people in your agency, all the way to presidents. Those you always work with, those who work for you, your troops, your implementers, and finally, people in communities, research institutions, other sectors. You're going to get very irritated by one of the stakeholders, I'm sorry. Stakeholder 1 is not interested and has no power. This is number 1. And this is a power interest matrix that you use. So his score is 3 out of 10. Number 2, this monster has lots of power, is absolutely not interested in your project. So he has a score of 5. Number 3, the monster has all the power and all the interest, so it's 10, his score. And number 4 has no power, but he's very interested. So he has a score of 6. What strategy should you follow with them? The strategy for number 1, you just watch this guy. Why? Because maybe he will acquire power, or maybe he will become interested, or maybe he will become the big guy at some point. So you better watch and see what's going on. With number 3, I put watch out. Watch out means pay very close attention, because he has power and he has interest. But what if his interest is in derailing your project, stopping your project, not giving resources? So you need to make sure that you are going to do what that guy needs. The guy with power and no interest, you have to keep that guy satisfied, because maybe if he's not interested, he can in some way be an obstacle to your project. And number 4 has to be kept informed. Why? Because even if he doesn't have any power, he can serve as a disseminator of information, an educator, as a networker, etc., etc. Now, this matrix is how do you engage your stakeholders. This is you, and let's say that you have 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 1 is unaware of your project, but it's a very important actor. So you want to move this guy from being unaware of your project to be one of the leading institutions. Number 2, he's an anti-vaccine, for example. So what you need to do is at least neutralize that stakeholder. so he doesn't damage your project. But ideally, you would like that guy to be supportive. Number 3 was neutral, but it's very important that he gets involved in your project. And number 4 is unaware, but you need that guy to be supportive. What did Gervase talk about going from current to desired status? Well, this is you. You are here. You need to convince. The art of persuasion, you use your well-reasoned arguments of logic. You appeal to the sentiments, to the feelings, sense of equity. This is not acceptable. The benefit, and this is really, really important, what's in it for the decision maker? Financial gain, political gain, anything, health, whatever is the benefit. And hope is for the community, for the people in general. Why not possibility? What if probability? And what now? What's going to be the destiny of this? And something that books don't talk about, force, when they have no choice but comply. And I'm not talking about putting a gun to the forehead of somebody. I'm talking about political movements, for example, social activism, telling somebody that you are going to boycott the company if that company doesn't do something, the tobacco industry, for example. And I think that's, let me see if there's something else that I wanted to present to you. No, I'm sorry. I'm giving up my final conclusions. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing. And we can, Zira, tell us what we are going to do.
Sure. So we thought that in the interest of time, we can perhaps focus on one central question, which is how can public and private stakeholders collaborate to promote a successful COVID-19 vaccination program? So I think the floor is open now, and if anyone has any ideas and thoughts, please feel free to jump in.
We are going to force Giovanna to say something because she's in the pharmaceutical industry and working in a multinational on regulatory aspects. Sorry, Giovanna, but you're first.
Hello, everyone. Apologies for not seeing me today. I've been having some issues with my connection, but and thank you for awesome presentations. It was really enjoyable to listen to. But well, my opinion here is actually to convince people that these vaccines are actually going to do good to them, because I feel like even though COVID has had a great impact, I feel like there's a lot of skepticism, and especially in drug development, because it takes a lot of time in order to test the efficiency and safety. So that would be, I think that would be an important aspect. But I'd like to hear more from you guys too. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I suggest that some of you take the position, let's say, of a government, whatever your feelings are. If you want to represent the pharmaceutical industry or a government or the research sector or the implementers or even the public, because some people are against vaccination. So please, if somebody has ideas, you are not here, so you can say whatever you want.
Also, if you have any issues unmuting yourself, please write in the chat and let me know. But everyone should be able to unmute themselves.
Since I haven't seen my friend Stanley Blanco from Bolivia in a long time, I'm going to ask him directly to take the position of an NGO or the government regarding vaccination. Oh, Awa, NG wanted to say something. Awa?
Yeah, hi.
Yeah.
Am I clear?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I joined actually pretty late, but thank you for the presentations. I'm sure I will follow up with what I have missed. I am going to really be the devil advocate for equity, let's say, to just bring in an equity perspective here. That is, who are we targeting first? And maybe we should be more open to vulnerable groups and maybe groups that are left out. Let's say women, migrants, refugees, etc. We should also think about, also when we say equity in general, let's say if it is healthcare workers or essential workers, not really targeting doctors and nurses, but people who are at the lowest level of the pyramid, so to say, like the cleaners or something like that. And maybe also we should learn or take lessons from other vaccines programs that are already available. What were their struggles or setbacks, and maybe bring all of um, the positive things forward. I mean, that's all I have to say for now. But I'm really looking forward to see how this whole vaccination process will go globally. Interesting times. Thank you.
Thank you. Somebody else? Some comments? Stanley, are
Yes,
you ready?
Don Fernando, will you allow me to?
Yeah, that's Jose Romero. Okay,
Yes.
please.
I really think that a very key element, as Dr. Gervase was mentioning, is really plunging into the nature of education. And, you know, like opening up a little bit. Are we talking about, just a minute, a little bit of interference. Are we talking about information? Or are we talking about education? And what does that really mean? What is that difference? No? Which one captures more the understanding of culture and the understanding of resistances? No? With different groups. And what type of governments, what type of actors, what type of pharmaceuticals are outfitted to really generate trust through communication mechanisms, you know, through truly becoming professional in the act of education and information. I think this is especially when ambiguous information, fake news, lack of trust is permeating. So we have a very challenging atmosphere, which needs to be really dealt with in a highly professional way. To me, this is really a very relevant point of discussion brought forth by Dr. Gervase, and I think it's one of the key elements to generate trust. Without collective trust, nothing will happen.
Okay. Thank you, Don Jose. Anybody else? Because we are, Shirley is telling me that we are very short. Actually, we are over the time. But if somebody else wants to make a comment or a sort of a quotation regarding the presentations, please do, or a position from a different stakeholder viewpoint, please go
Yes,
ahead.
we have Adasi that would like.
Coffee, please.
Yes, please go ahead.
One of
So
our mentors.
we see that many developed countries have already made orders for vaccines. We haven't seen any from the underdeveloped countries. So now there is a big gap between those who have and those who do not have. How do we ensure that, those third world countries who cannot afford to pay, talking about private public partnership, be supported in such situations?
I would like to pass that question to Rodrigo.
Just the easy ones, right,
Yeah,
Fernando?
yeah, just the easy ones. Okay.
So I think
with
I would agree that that is a big issue. This program that the WHO put together, right, is meant to make sure that the medicines are delivered, the vaccines are delivered globally to the developed world as well, the developing world. And And sadly, you know, out of $38 billion that they estimate they need, I think they've collected about 5 billion or something like that. The European Union developed their own program, right? Which is actually helping in developing nations as well. So other, you know, each country is responding in the way that they feel that they are able to. But I think the gap is tremendous between what is actually being committed and what is needed. So, you know, we are, I would say, not ready to deal with the pandemic the best way, and the countries are not contributing from the developed world to the developing world in the way that they need to. So I think much more needs to be done, I would say.
Thank you. Antonio, you want to say something about the 3x5, because we had a similar problem with AIDS and HIV and the antiretrovirals. Can you say a few words about that? A few words.
1, 2, 3. Are you there?
Yeah.
Yes. Look, it was extremely interesting. First, because it was an opportunity of many different factors. I would say that the first factor that put things online for 3x5 in 2002, 2003 was activism. At that time, in each international AIDS conference, we had activists challenging the industry, pharmaceutical industry, even destroying the panels and everything, that the industry then constructed foldable panels that were able to be destroyed and rebuilt very quickly. This was interesting. But the fact is that this happened in 98, 99. Don't forget that effective antiretroviral started in 96. And then with this situation in 98, 99 in South Africa conference,
Yeah.
what happened? Nobody wanted conflict. Nobody wanted conflict anymore. We wanted progress. And the first thing was that the industry said, okay, from next year, we are lowering the price to the 50 poorest countries. That was like that, 50.
Okay.
And
Okay.
it was immediately made free for mother-to-child transmission.
And there was also some pressure on the pharmaceutical industry regarding the copyrights and you know, making sure with the patents there was a problem with Brazil and India and China.
The patents in Brazil worked like that. We had, and this is interesting because it's the human factor. There are the organizational factors, but we had two competent people at Fundação Oswaldo Cruz, Eloá Pinheiro, and professor that unfortunately died in that air crash. One was able to do re-engineering and to identify exactly what was needed to build the drug. And the other, coming from private industry of fruit juice, she was able to produce. But they never did it. It was just the government saying that they had the capability, they were able then to lower the price. This was one little story which is interesting. Yes. And another, then from the process point of view, last but not least, 3x5, then WHO built on that. It was possible to put 3 billion people. Okay. And we had teams facilitating the dialogue of the government with the pharmaceutical industry. We, as International Secretariat, we used to organize everything, but in the moment they had a meeting, we were out of the room. I did this in the Bahamas, and it was very interesting to be out of the room in the moment of the work. Yeah. But it was we were facilitators.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Antonio. We need to finish the webinar right now. Not right now. I just want to come up with some conclusions. And the main aspect that I would like to emphasize now okay, sorry. Let me see if I can. Okay. This is what I would like. If you want to work together, you need shoes. And that is very, very important. And I would re-emphasize it what all the presenters and yourselves already know. You need to be self-aware. Be sure that you are willing and able to cooperate and that you know who your prospective partners are, especially if you have to lose your power or share your power with others. That's very important. Self-awareness. That's what you get when you using your natural intelligence. And when you look at your own shoes, who are you? What is your power? What is your degree of interest? The second one has to do with empathy. Try to look from the same side of the street as your prospective partners. Use your emotional intelligence and put yourself in their shoes. What would you feel if you were in their shoes? And finally, this is something that we don't consider. Your deductive capacity. Try to understand the motivation of your prospective partners. So in this case, what you do, use your social intelligence and figure out why are they wearing precisely those shoes and not other shoes. Now, in the case that we are talking about, you need self-awareness and you need to use this social intelligence, but don't forget the emotional intelligence. And finally, I want to leave you with some words and images to remember. Stakeholders, your partners, and you are at the center of the compass. Power and interest, your shoes. And finally, the power to persuade. So I wanted to leave you with these 4 images because that's what you have to consider when you are going to work with other parties. And I just wanted to reemphasize or emphasize what the rest of the speakers and you in your own minds are already thinking about. And with that, I would like to thank all the presenters, our technical helpers, Shirley Bejarano and Charlie Shang, and we had people from Singapore and France and Geneva and Brazil and Mexico and the US, et cetera, and Canada. So I would like to give everybody, Multipodians and friends, our thanks. And as a bonus, there's not going to be an evaluation. Okay, so you don't have to evaluate the webinar, but I want to thank everybody for being here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.